Still to come, one of the most important discoveries in space happened in Delaware. We'll explain. And a disease you need to know about if you're a cat owner. This is the Delaware Way. Welcome to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. You may have read about it. One of the most important planetary discoveries, well, in history recently happened. What you may not know is it started here in Delaware. John Gizis is professor of astronomy at the University of Delaware, one of the professors of astronomy at the University of Delaware. So you discovered a star in 1999. Is that right?
That's right. So in 1999, we got new technology with infrared cameras, and we were able, for the first time, to take pictures of the entire sky using infrared cameras. And the result was that we were able to find previously unnoticed stars that were actually very close to us.
So you found a lot of stars that hadn't been discovered before, but one of them turned out to be particularly important. And recently in the news, they have talked about the stars with planets that could sustain life that are much like Earth, and that was your star.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So once you took the moment, since of course they did rename it, so now it's called TRAPPIST-1 instead of the sort of
instead of Professor Gizis.
Yeah, or the 12-digit number that we gave it.
Yeah, right.
that of course it turns out that it's one that has sort of Earth-sized planets orbiting him, and some of them are at the right distance to be receiving the right amount of sunlight. That you could at least imagine that they might be the right temperature to have liquid oceans and lakes and ponds and who knows what. Of course, we don't know for sure that any of that exists, but we hope that we'll be able to measure in the future. And that's the other reason the star is so important to astronomers.
Right. And when you first discovered this star, did you realize any of that at the time?
Well, one of our justifications was always that, well, you want to find the nearby stars because someday people will be, trying to measure planets around them and other things. So we would always say that, but it wasn't practical at that time, and I didn't really pursue it, which of course is a mistake, now we see. So we had that, in mind for the long term, but we didn't think that anything, would necessarily develop around this one or any of them in particular.
Space is so expansive. Do you have an opinion on whether there's life on other planets?
I think there must be life on other planets of some form, but I guess I'm kind of skeptical about whether there are any nearby, life that we could talk to and that are, similar to humans or something like that.
Or could possibly get to us or we get to them.
Exactly. It seems that space is so large that travel is very impractical. And of course, one always worries, this is sometimes called the Fermi paradox, as if it were practical to travel, why wouldn't they have arrived 1 million years ago or 100 million years ago, because there are many stars that are very old, right?
You're going to have a lot of people coming back at you and say, no, that's happened.
Well, but we don't think that that's really the case. I mean, those don't hold up when you investigate them carefully.
Right.
So,
what about the star that you found and the planets that are surrounding that star, or any of the other stars for that matter?
Yeah.
Those are planets, as you mentioned, that could sustain life.
Well, in principle, the excitement is that they're at the right distance to get the right amount of sunlight, that you could imagine they're the right temperature. And because they're orbiting such a small star, they're very close. And so what happens is that it means that we can observe their year is only a few days, like a week or something like that, and that means that we can measure them going around the star many, many, many times. So one of the problems that we have to study a truly Earth-like planet, if we had any that go around a star, is that it only happens once a year. And so if you find out that you calculate you need to observe it go around 100 times, we're out of luck, right? But if 100 times, if the year is only a week, then then it's practical again. So that's one of the reasons that astronomers are even more excited about these particular planets.
So a discovery like this makes space exploration, and I'm talking about with telescopes, that much more important and allows the funding for it?
Well, exactly. But furthermore, there's a planned telescope called James Webb Space Telescope, which is sort of in a way, the successor to Hubble Space Telescope, and it's going to be launched next year. And so one of the cases was always that it could measure planets, but one of the awkward facts was that we didn't have any planets that were really ideal for it to measure. And so we've lucked into finding these planets around this particular star just in time for James Webb Space Telescope to start measuring them when it launches.
When you discovered these stars, were you thinking to yourself, hey, this is a big deal, and nobody was covering it as a big deal at the time? Now, all of a sudden, in retrospect, they understand it was a big deal.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, of course, it's very difficult, to get any job as an astronomer. So I, kept, my career going, and so, I was appreciated enough. And of course, the difficult thing was to find the planets, and that's what, these other astronomers have done.
All science builds off other science.
That's right, and so things that are seemingly very small and unimportant now can become more important and useful down the road, and one doesn't really know that well. So it's one of the problems with basic research.
So what are you working on now?
Well, one thing we're trying to measure is that we believe that this star will be having enormous solar flares, and that these might be quite important for understanding the chemistry of the atmosphere and maybe its suitability for life. And so a NASA telescope named Kepler has just been observing the star, and the data was released last week.
It sounds like everybody's now looking at this star, at your star. Everybody's now, all the attention is on that star.
Yeah, it's a super exciting thing that each week new results are developing. We're hopeful that we at least have the potential for measuring signs of life.
Now that we know where this star is, and now that we know where the planets are, is it possible to send the probe there?
If it could travel the speed of light, then it would take 40 years to get there, and then it would take us 40 years to get the radio signal back. So that's 80 years. But in fact, we're not capable of doing anything close to traveling at the speed of light. And so by present-day technology, it's very far away.
But does it matter if we get the information in a lifetime? I mean, even if we were to get that information 160 years from now, it's still pertinent information, is it not?
That's right, but we will by that time be building even larger telescopes, presumably in space. And so I think the trade-off of what you would like to do is under development, I guess we would say.
Is this purely out of scientific curiosity, or is there a practical reason for knowing if there's life on other planets?
I think it's probably a case of pure scientific curiosity. But of course, it would be very interesting to discover,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It would make every science fiction movie true all of a sudden. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate you being here. John Gizis, Professor of Astronomy at the University of Delaware, who made one of the most important discoveries in space in recent history. It's just nobody knew it at the time. When we come back, there is a devastating disease that's hitting cats in Delaware. We'll talk more about that when the Delaware Way continues.